There was this luxury of living. The next morning he lay upon his bed and watched the woman who was now wholly his own. She rose and drew about her loosened garments, and fastened them closely about her throat and waist, fitting them to her body with a slow writhe and twist. Then she put her feet into her cloth shoes, and drew them on by the straps hanging at the back. The light from the small hole shone on her in a bar, and she saw her face dimly. It looked unchanged. This was an astonishment to Wang Long. He felt as though the night must have changed him. Yet there was this woman rising from his bed as though she had risen every day of her life. The old man's cough rose querulously out of the dusky dawn, and he said to her, "Take to my father first a bowl of hot water for his lungs." She asked in her voice exactly as it had been yesterday when she spoke, "Are there to be tea leaves in it?" The simple question troubled Wang Lung. He would have liked to say, "Certainly there must be tea leaves. Do you think we are beggars?" He would have liked the woman to think that they made nothing of tea leaves in this house. In the house of Huang, of course, every bowl of water was green with leaves. Even a slave there, perhaps, would not drink only water. But he knew his father would be angry if on the first day the woman served him tea instead of water. Besides, they really were not rich. He replied, negligently therefore, "Tea? No, no. It makes his cough worse." And then he lay in his bed, warm and satisfied, while in the kitchen the woman fed the fire and boiled the water. He would like to have slept, now that he could, but his foolish body, which he had made to arise every morning so early for all these years, would not sleep although it could, and so he lay there, tasting and savoring in his mind and in his flesh the luxury of idleness. He was still half ashamed to think of this woman as his. Part of the time he thought of his fields and of the grains, of the wheat, and of what his harvest would be if the rains came, and of the white turnip seed he wished to buy from his neighbor Ching if they could agree upon a price. But between all these thoughts which were in his mind every day, there ran, weaving and interweaving, the new thought of what his life now was. And it occurred to him suddenly, thinking of the night, to wonder if she liked him. This was a new wonder. He had questioned only of whether he would like her, and whether or not she would be satisfactory in his bed and in his house. Plain though her face was, and rough the skin upon her hands, the flesh of her big body was soft and untouched, and he laughed when he thought of it. The sort of hard laugh he had thrown out into the darkness the night before. The young lords had not seen, then, beyond the plain face of the kitchen slave. Her body was beautiful, spare and big boned, yet rounded and soft. He desired suddenly that she should like him as her husband, and then he was ashamed. The door opened, and in her silent way she came in bearing in both hands a steaming bowl to him. He sat up in bed and took it. There were tea leaves floating upon the surface of the water. He looked up at her quickly. She was at once afraid, and she said, "I took no tea to the old one. I did as you said. But to you, I..." Wang Lung saw that she was afraid of him, and he was pleased, and he answered before she finished, "I like it. I like it." And he drew his tea to his mouth with loud sups of pleasure. in himself there was this new exultation, which he was ashamed to make articulate, even though it was his own heart. This woman of mine, she likes me well enough. Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, in the month of love, the well rounded nerd, and I thought I would look at love as an objective topic this month from some different literary sources. Yes, there will be Transformers. Yes, there will be Warhammer, but there will also be love once in a while. Why? Because it's an important topic. And especially out there right now in the social zeitgeist, there is just so much bad information and advice. Everyone seems to be just so inwardly turned and focused on self that we have forgotten that relationships are made of two people. And whatever that relationship is and how it came to be, it is between those two people to decide what the relationship is, what their goals are for the relationship, and if those two people are wholly satisfied with the arrangement. But why on earth would I read from the good earth on such a topic? Because the marriage I just described doesn't seem like one of choice and equality. I always like to go back to historical fiction when discussing a topic like this because, again, what does fiction do for us? It gives us a safe lens from which to examine difficult issues without talking about the real thing. And a large part of my audience, the most of my audience, I know who you are, I see my analytics, it's mostly dudes between like 18 and 55, and there's nothing wrong with that. I know it is rare for a woman in this space, one, to be genuine because I use my own game controllers. Do you think I'd get up here and play Space Marine 2 that badly and brag about it if it wasn't actually me? I could have somebody else hold my game controller, but I'm not. Natina Shade, no pink lemonade. Um, but I understand that it's rare that someone in the hobbies that I enjoy, like Warhammer, Transformers, that kind of thing, to find a woman who is genuinely into it. I've been to Adepticon once. In my heart, I thought because I was a girl going that there'd be like 10 girl players in the 30K game. I was ready for it. No, there was one other. One. There were more over playing Battletech in the same ballroom, but over in 30K land, there was one other. There were two of us. So I'm hoping we double our numbers this year, and there's four. High hopes indeed. But why is that? I don't I think a lot of women would actually like these strategy games if they really started to dig into them because women on the whole are very strategic thinkers. We are managers of lives and household, which takes a lot of strategy. And to have an outlet for that, I feel like a lot of women are not as interested as they could be. So I like to call myself the girl ambassador of the tabletop gaming world. Am I the best at it? No. But I enjoy it, and I have a really good community. I think our local Horse Heresy community. A couple more ladies have joined. I'm hoping when I go to an event coming up soon locally that there's going to be a couple of them there and we can all support each other. But anyway, I digress. Why talk about the topic of love and relationship through an obvious relationship that is not one born of choice? So, if you've not read The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck, and remember, this is a pseudonym, nobody named Pearl wrote this book. Um, but um, when Wang Lung is the central character, and we're talking about China a long time ago, which is one of my favorite parts of history to look at. Just a completely different way of living. But again, this is historical fiction, not history. Some things are going to be embellished for the sake of story. But Wang Lung is just a poor farmer, and there is a great house in the area where he leases his land, like everybody else does. But he gets it in his brain one day that he's ready to have a wife, because that's what you do. He is of an age where he should have a wife. His father is getting older and sick. He's having to do all the things. He literally wakes up one day and goes, "Why am I doing all the chores?" Like that's basically what happened. Why am I doing all this? I need a wife. But you have to remember the society. Well, in the West, especially in the modern Western culture, we are blessed with the idea that marriage is about feelings and choice and fireworks and whatever other garbage we want to throw on it. But marriage, yes, love is definitely a part of it, but marriage is a choice of people to build a life together, whatever that's going to look like. And the way marriage happens is very different in different cultures. That's why it can be very difficult for people with different cultural backgrounds to build a lasting relationship, because if one culture does arranged marriage and you're in this whether you want to be or not, and another culture does love choice marriage, and those two people meet, not just clashes of individuals, there can be clashes of culture from the outside family. So there's so much stuff involved. But in this particular culture, it's a culture of arranged marriage, and it's also a culture of, well, women could be sold for marriage. And in this case, Wang Lun goes to the great house of Huang and he buys a kitchen slave as his wife. Now, think about it from her perspective. And in this book, we do not hear her speak very often. It's actually a long time before we even learn the woman's name. She's just the wife. But she is just a she is someone who was born into slavery. She serves this great house. Apparently she serves well. um but she is considered property. She is a lower class. So for her, we don't really get to hear from her until way later in the book, when she's able to do some things for the family that, when they come into hard times, that Wang Lung may not have known to do without her, and he actually grows a new respect for her out of that. But being a slave, being from a poor family and sold into slavery, she has no expectations of her life. So is it better for her to just stay a kitchen slave, or is it better for her to be sold to a man to be his wife? Because this is an era and a place where, the men could treat their wives basically how they wanted. He actually says, after bringing her home after the first night, that she is unspoiled, meaning the sons of the house, the great house, had not done things to her. That's the only way I'm going to say that, which was very much a possibility, because, again, when a person is looked at as property, no one cares what happens to them. And he's pleased that this woman who is now in his house is as great as he is. He actually, if you read between the lines of what he's saying, he doesn't even feel like he deserves her. It's like he's like, did they know she was this great? She's kind of great. And she's accepted her lot in life, and she doesn't really give us much reaction or emotion. We see her perspective through his perspective. And it's so easy to go, well, he just bought this woman, so why would he care about her? But he actually says multiple times throughout the book, God, I hope she likes me. So even in a relationship that is very much a contracted arrangement, he needs somebody to look after his old father, clean the house, and if he's lucky, have kids. But it's kind of great if she likes me. If even in a relationship like that, someone who lives in a culture where there is no expectation of love in the marriage arrangement would want that to be a part of the arrangement, I think what that teaches us is that when we look at all of the reasons for marriages to be brought together, that we have to kind of remove the superficial. Like, yeah, I love my husband. I think he is the most handsomest man on earth. You can't tell me any different. But I also know that he takes great care of me in our household. I know that he supports me. I know that I can trust him with big decisions. I know that he is always being protective of me in our household. It's more than just I love him. I do love him, but he is also somebody that I can rely on. And I'm someone that he can rely on. He knows I'm going to be there for him. He knows that I got the inside of this house and my crazy garden out front under control. That I got it held down. That when his aging parents need help, that I am there to do things as needed. That we have hobbies and things that we enjoy together. It's more than just the butterflies. Butterflies are great, and butterflies are wonderful, but butterflies are not always automatic. Sometimes people have to grow in love. Have you ever seen or read the play Fiddler on the Roof? A big central plot element is Tevye has none but daughters, bunch of daughters, and they all have to get married off, 5 of them, and progressively, the oldest daughter is the most traditional that they've raised, and they are actually about to give her away in marriage to the richest man in the city. And she doesn't want to marry him. She wants to marry the poor tailor, Mottle, the poor tailor. And mom is like, "What? You could marry the butcher and we could all be rich because you're married to the butcher, but you want to marry the poor tailor?" But her father's heart is softened and he lets his daughter marry the man she chooses, but he's still a man that fits the mold of good, orthodox, Jewish young man who's going to provide for his daughter and take care of his future grandchildren. So it's okay. Second daughter is a little bit more spunky, um, and they don't arrange a marriage for her, but she picks a young man that comes into town and is tutoring the youngest two in the scriptures. So he even though he's unshaven, he is a Jewish youth, and he is able to talk about philosophy and scripture and poetry and all these great things. And middle daughter, a little bit wild, falls in love with that one. It's like I love him, father, and he's like, this is not how marriages are arranged, but he's Jewish and good, so you can marry. He gives his blessing. And then the last of the oldest 3 daughters wants to marry someone who's not even Jewish. And at that last one, he cannot give his blessing. He actually literally cast his daughter and her new husband out of their life because they secretly went to the local priest and got married. Because for their culture, marriage was more than just, ooh, I love him, I love her, I love them, they're so great. It was family ties, it was culture continuing, it was the next generation, it was making sure there was going to be hands to work the field. Everyone in that culture understood that marriage was not about the butterflies. And Tevye and his wife, even at one point, when they look at their daughters getting married, he asked his wife, do you love me? And she's like, do I love him? And after 5 babies in 30 years, they suppose they do. And we would look at that with our modern sensibilities and say, that's not love, because she was probably in an arranged marriage to him. She probably met him the day they got married. And then she is in the bed of this strange man. And he is in the bed with this strange woman, and they're expected to do the thing and make babies and continue the community, continue traditions, raise their children the way they're expected to raise them. That is the same kind of world that Wang Lung is in and his wife. Marriage wasn't, I love him. It was, there's a goal to accomplish so society can function. They are in Confucian society. Man, woman, all have a position: husband, wife, son, daughter, grandparents, grandchildren. Everyone has a function. And if you're not fulfilling that function, then you end up a slave because there was no one over you to protect you from that hard life. So outwardly it makes you a less valuable person. But now Wang Lung has made her someone valuable. She is a wife and a first wife in a household. I would highly recommend reading this book. For some people, it can be a hard read, but it is a look at life, love, and relationships from an ancient Eastern perspective that I think, one, makes us thankful for the freedom that we have to choose in our modern world, but also reminds us that when entering into any kind of relationship that could be romantic or otherwise, everyone in that relationship may be there for a different reason. If expectations are laid out and everyone knows what's expected of them, that's where the ability for things to function correctly happen, whatever correct looks like. Because the way marriage works in my culture and the way it works in your culture may be completely different. But with all of the info out there about trying to figure out, oh, this is how you know if a woman loves you. This is how you know if a guy really likes you. This is how you know if it's love. This is how you know if it's love. If they don't do this, if they don't do that. If they don't do this, if they don't do that. Cancel out the noise. Go and read some old words and old wisdom. And I'm going to read a chapter actually out of the Bible later in this month that really lays out what love should look like, a blueprint of love, if you will. But I think looking at Wang Lung and his wife, who don't know each other, who are now in a marriage where they have to do the things society expects of them, they both settle in and play their roles. It is a business arrangement, it is a life arrangement. And in their small ways, they do show each other, I'm satisfied with what fate has brought me. And there's the big lesson. We live in a world where there's so much choice and it's right in front of us that none of us can be satisfied with what we have. You could do better. You could be better. I'm not talking about situations where somebody's doing things that are harmful to another human being, so you need to get out of that. I'm talking about he always leaves his socks on the floor. She's been too long on that phone with her best friend. The quirks of our personalities that make us individuals, and how people let those small things that make individuals turn into big things that drive us apart over time. This is a society where they don't care about those things, because a man and a woman being brought together to continue lineage and build beautiful Confucian family was the goal. And over time, those quirks and things don't even matter because they learn to love each other. And in those small ways, they give pieces of themselves to each other. Does it ever fulfill the modern Western sensibility of what love and marriage should look like? Not in this book. Don't expect that to happen. But even still, I think it's a good lesson for us to stop thinking of humans as checklists that check. If they don't hit 80% out of my list, then they can't be it. Date what you like, be with who you want. But remember, just as much as you're an individual, they're an individual. And if you like them enough, then you build a life together with whatever fate throws your way. It seemed to him that during these next month he did nothing except watch this woman of his. In reality, he worked as he always did. He put his hoe upon his shoulder, and he walked to his plots of land, and he cultivated the rows of grain. And he yoked the ox to the plow, and he plowed the western field for garlic and onions. But the work was luxury, for when the sun struck the zenith, he could go to his house, and food would be there ready for him to eat, and the dust wiped from the table, and the bowls and the chopsticks placed neatly upon it. Hitherto, he had to prepare the meal when he came in, tired though he was, unless the old man grew hungry out of a time, and stirred up a little meal, or baked a piece of flat bread, and rolled it out into a stem of garlic. Now, whatever there was ready for him, and he could seat himself upon the bench by the table and eat at once. The earthen floor was swept, and the fuel pile was replenished. The woman, when he had gone in the morning, took the bamboo rake and a length of rope, and with these she roamed the countryside, reaping here a bit of grass and there a twig or a handful of leaves, returning at noon with enough to cook the dinner. It pleased the man that they need buy no more fuel. In the afternoon she took a hoe and a basket, and with these upon her shoulder she went to the main road leading to the city, where mules and donkeys and horses carried burdens to and fro. There she picked droppings from the animals and carried them home, and piled the manure in the dooryard for fertilizer for the fields. These things she did without a word and without being commanded to do them. And when the end of the day came, she did not rest herself until the ox had been fed in the kitchen, and until she had dipped water to hold it to the muzzle, and to let it drink what it would. And then she took her ragged clothes, and with thread she herself spun on a bamboo spindle from a wad of cotton, she mended or contrived to cover the rents in their winter clothes. Their bedding she took into the sun on the threshold, and ripped the coverings from the quilts, and washed them, and hung them upon bamboo to dry. And the cotton in the quilts that had grown hard and gray from the years, she picked over, killing the vermin that had flourished in the hidden folds, and sunning it all day. Day after day, she did one thing after another until the 3 rooms seemed clean and almost prosperous. The old man's croft grew better, and he sat in the sun by the southern wall of the house, always half asleep in the warm and content. But she never talked, this woman, except for the brief necessities of life. Wang Lung watched her move steadily and slowly about the rooms on her big feet, watching secretly the stolid square face, the unexpressed, half fearful look in her eyes, made nothing of her. At night, he knew the soft firmness of her body, but in the day, her clothes, her plain blue cotton coat and trousers, covered all that he knew, and she was like a faithful, speechless serving maid, who is only a serving maid and nothing more. And when it was not meet that he should say to her, "Why do you not speak?" it should be enough that she fulfilled her duty. Sometimes, working over the clods in the field, he would fall to pondering about her. What had she seen in those 100 courts? What had been her life? That life that she never shared with him. He could make nothing of it. And then he was ashamed of his own curiosity and of his interest in her. She was, after all, only a woman. But there is not that about 3 rooms and 2 meals a day to keep busy a woman who has been a slave in a great house and who has worked from dawn till midnight. One day, when Wang Lung was hard pressed with the swelling wheat and was cultivating with the hoe day after day until his back throbbed with weariness, her shadow fell across the furrow over which he bent himself, and there she stood, with the hoe across her shoulder. "There is nothing in the house until nightfall," she said briefly, and without speech she took the furrow to the left of him and fell to it steadily hoeing. The sun beat down upon them, for it was early summer, and her face was soon dripping with her sweat. Wang Lung had his coat off and his back bare, but she worked with her thin garment covering her shoulders, and it grew wet and clung to her skin. Moving together in a perfect rhythm, without a word, hour after hour, he fell into a union with her, which took the pain from his labor. He had no articulate thought of anything. There was only this perfect sympathy of movement, of turning this earth of theirs over and over to the sun. This earth which formed their home and fed their bodies and made their gods. The earth lay rich and dark, and fell apart lightly under the points of their hoes. Sometimes they turned up a bit of brick, a splinter of wood. It was nothing. In some time, in some age, bodies of men and women had been buried there. Houses had stood there, had fallen, had gone back into the earth. So would also their house, sometime, return into the earth, their bodies also. Each had his turn at this earth. They worked on, moving together, producing the fruit of this earth, speechless in their movement together. When the sun had set, he straightened his back slowly and looked at the woman. Her face was wet and streaked with earth. She was brown as the very soil itself. Her wet dark garments clung to her square body. She smoothed the last furrow slowly. Then, in her usual plain way, she said, straight out, her voice flat and more unusually plain and silent in the evening air, "I am with child." Wang Lung stood still. What was there to say to this thing, then? She stooped to pick up a bit of broken brick and threw it out of the furrow. It was as though she had said, "I have brought you tea," or as though she had said, "We can eat." It seemed as ordinary as that to her, but to him, he could not say what it was to him. His heart swelled and stopped as though it had met certain confines. Well, it was their turn at this earth. He took the hoe suddenly from her hand, and he said, his voice thick in his throat, let it be for now. It is a day's end. We will tell the old man." They walked home. Then, she half a dozen paces behind him, as befitted a woman, the old man stood at the door, hungry for his evening's food, which, now that the woman was in the house, he would never have to prepare for himself. He was impatient as he called out, "I am too old to wait for my food like this." But Wang Lung, passing him into the room, said, "She is with child already." He tried to say it as easily as one might say, "I have planted the seeds in the western field today," but he could not. Although he spoke in a low voice, it was to him as though he had shouted the words out louder than he would. The old man blinked for a moment, and then comprehended, then cackled with laughter. He called out to his daughter in law as she came, "So, the harvest is in sight. I shall prepare food now." "Yes, yes, food," said the old man eagerly, following her into the kitchen like a child. Just as the thought of a grandson had made him forget his meal, so now the thought of freshly having food before him made him forget the child. But Wang Lung sat upon the bench by the table, and in the darkness, and put his head upon his folded arms. Out of his body, out of his own loins, life. The good earth is such a perfect picture of how men and women, how relationships are meant to bind us and build us. It is a hard read, but it is a good read, and it teaches us good lessons. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.